The evening was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of stillness that makes every creak of the floorboards and hum of the refrigerator seem amplified. I had just finished cleaning up after dinner, relishing the calm of the house after a long day. My husband had gone to bed early, exhausted from work, leaving me to soak in the solitude. As I wiped the counters, the faint sound of running water from the guest bathroom caught my attention. My husband's best friend, Adam, was staying with us for the weekend, but honestly, I'd barely noticed his presence that evening. Something felt different, though. The sound of the water wasn't the casual hum of someone washing up. It lingered, almost hesitant. The door to the bathroom was ajar just slightly, and through the crack, I noticed a flicker of movement. At first, I thought nothing of it, but as I approached, my curiosity grew. It wasn't just the sound or the movement, it was the way the air seemed to shift, heavy with an energy I couldn't quite explain. Before we get deeper into this story, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who loves a good true crime story, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, this is only the beginning, and things are about to get intense. I froze in the doorway, my hand still resting lightly against the frame. Adam was there, completely unaware of my presence, the sound of the water masking any noise I had made. His posture, the tension in his movements, it left no doubt about what he was doing. My heart raced, pounding so loudly I was sure he would hear it. My immediate reaction was to step back, to give him his privacy and pretend I had seen nothing. But I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the floor, my thoughts tangled in a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. Anger, embarrassment, and something I couldn't quite name swirled inside me. I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have stayed. But I did. It wasn't the act itself that rooted me to the spot, it was the vulnerability of it. There was something raw about the moment, something unfiltered and entirely unexpected. Adam, the confident, easygoing man I had known for years, looked so unguarded, so human. I told myself to look away, to leave, but I didn't. Instead, I stayed frozen in that doorway, my breath shallow, my hands trembling slightly. The air between us felt heavy, charged with a tension I couldn't explain. What was I supposed to do? Say something? Walk away? And pretend this never happened? My mind raced, but my body refused to cooperate. I couldn't stand there any longer, frozen in silence. My hand trembled as I knocked softly on the door. The sound felt deafening in the stillness of the house, and the door creaked open just a little more. Adam spun around instantly, his face flushed, his movements frantic as he tried to cover himself. His eyes were wide, filled with panic, and his words tumbled out in disjointed fragments. I didn't mean. I raised my hand instinctively, as if to stop him from saying more. It's okay, I said, my voice barely audible, soft and uncertain. I wasn't sure why I said it, or what I even meant by it. The words came out before I could stop them, hanging in the charged air between us. Adam's breathing was uneven, and he dropped his gaze, his shoulders slumping under the weight of embarrassment. I didn't mean for this to happen, he said, his words rushing out in a mix of apology and desperation. I've been so stressed, so I didn't think anyone would know. His vulnerability caught me off guard. This wasn't the confident, easygoing Adam I'd known for years. He looked like someone unraveling, someone burdened by things he didn't know how to express. I didn't mean for you to see that, he added, his voice quieter now, almost breaking. I'm sorry, really. I shook my head, unsure of how to respond. You don't have to apologize, I said, though even I didn't understand why, I felt the need to reassure him. And then, as if a dam had broken, he started talking, really talking. He told me about how lonely he'd been feeling, about how hard it was to carry the weight of expectations without anyone to confide in. His words were raw, honest, and so unlike the Adam I thought I knew. I didn't know how to deal with it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to bother anyone with my problems. Not you. Not him. No one. I listened, caught between the shock of the moment and the undeniable truth of his pain. There was a heaviness in his words, a loneliness that resonated with me in ways I hadn't expected. Adam, I said finally, my voice steadier now, you don't have to go through this alone. The words hung there for a moment, a fragile offering in the silence that followed. He looked up at me then, his eyes searching mine, and I saw something I hadn't seen before, a quiet gratitude, tinged with the faintest trace of hope. As I stood there listening to Adam pour out his emotions, something unexpected stirred deep within me. His words, raw and unfiltered, carried a vulnerability that wrapped around me, pulling me closer instead of pushing me away. I couldn't explain it, whether it was curiosity, the weight of his honesty, or the quiet longing I hadn't realized was still buried inside me. But I found myself stepping closer, bridging the distance between us. Our eyes met, and in that fleeting moment, the world faded into the background. The air between us was electric, charged with unspoken emotions. I didn't mean for this to happen, he said again, his voice trembling, but this time his words held a softness, almost like a plea. I knew I should walk away, shield myself from the intensity of it all, but I stayed, held captive by something I couldn't name, something I didn't want to escape. When he asked me to join him in the bathroom, my heart raced, each beat echoing the silent anticipation that hung between us. I followed him, every step feeling like a leap into the unknown. The soft glow of the light played against his face, and as I slipped off my clothes, it was as if I was shedding more than fabric, letting go of my fears, my hesitations, my guarded walls. The moment unfolded like a dream, unhurried and tender, filled with whispers of emotion too deep for words. The warmth of his touch, the quiet intensity of his gaze, the way his presence wrapped around me. It was all so intoxicatingly intimate. The water cascaded over us, but it wasn't just water. It was the quiet release of everything we'd held back, an unspoken promise shared in the soft rhythm of our connection. It wasn't just passion, it was something deeper, something that filled the spaces in my heart I didn't even know were empty. In that stolen moment, it wasn't just our bodies that connected, it was our souls, finding solace in each other's vulnerability, creating a memory that felt infinite, timeless, and achingly beautiful. The next morning, the weight of what had happened wrapped itself around me, unrelenting and heavy. Adam sat across the room, his shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed anywhere but on me. His expression, a tangled mix of guilt and confusion, mirrored the turmoil I felt. My own gaze remained fixed on the table, avoiding his at all costs, though my mind refused to silence the whirlwind of emotions threatening to unravel me. At breakfast, my husband sat between us, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. He talked animatedly about his weekend plans, his cheerful tone cutting through the tension that Adam and I worked so hard to mask. Every word, every glance exchanged in that room was laden with the effort to appear normal, to bury what had happened as though it could be forgotten. But the air felt thick, oppressive, and every small interaction seemed to crackle with unspoken truths. The days that followed were no kinder. The memory of that night followed me like a shadow, refusing to fade. It resurfaced in quiet moments, in stolen glances, in the silence of my thoughts when no one was watching. Each time, it demanded answers I wasn't prepared to give. Was it just a fleeting moment of weakness? Or had it revealed something deeper, something I'd been too afraid to acknowledge? And then came the questions that gripped my heart with fear. Could things ever go back to the way they were? Or had everything changed in ways I wasn't ready to face? The weight of what had happened didn't just linger. It threatened to shift the very foundation of my life, leaving me teetering between guilt, confusion, and the undeniable reality of what could never be undone. The confession came one evening when the silence between Adam and me had grown too loud to ignore. My husband had stepped out for a late-night errand, leaving us alone in the living room. I sat on the edge of the couch, wringing my hands, my pulse hammering in my ears. Adam paced across the room, his face pale, his movements restless. "I can't keep this inside anymore," he finally said, his voice hoarse. He stopped pacing and turned to me, his eyes filled with a mix of torment and desperation. "I need to tell him. He deserves to know." My stomach dropped. "Adam, no," I whispered, shaking my head, my voice barely audible. "It would destroy everything." "We can't," but my words faltered under the weight of the truth. A truth that had already started eating away at the fragile balance we were trying so hard to maintain. His jaw tightened, and he ran a hand through his hair, frustration radiating off him. I can't look him in the eye knowing what I've done. What we've done. It's not right. Before I could respond, the sound of the front door opening echoed through the house. My husband walked in, his cheerful voice breaking the tense atmosphere. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked, setting his keys down and looking between the two of us. Adam stiffened, his face a canvas of guilt. I tried to force a smile, but it crumbled under the weight of his piercing gaze. My husband's brow furrowed as he glanced between us, sensing the charged tension in the air. "What's wrong?" he asked, his tone more serious now. Adam's voice broke the silence. "I need to talk to you," he said, his words trembling but resolute. My heart sank, and I reached out instinctively, grabbing his arm. "Adam, don't," I pleaded, but it was too late. The look in his eyes told me he had already made up his mind. "What is going on?" my husband demanded, his voice rising slightly as he stepped closer. "Both of you, what is this about?" I felt my throat tighten, panic clawing at me as Adam began to speak, his words halting and heavy. I need to tell you the truth. About me. About us." My husband's face hardened, his eyes narrowing as the weight of Adam's words began to sink in. "Us?" he repeated, his voice laced with suspicion. His gaze turned to me, searching for answers I couldn't bear to give. "It was a mistake," I blurted out, my voice cracking. "It wasn't supposed to happen." The words hung in the air, a confession too raw to take back. The room fell into a suffocating silence. My husband's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to a kind of pain I had never seen before. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. Adam stepped forward, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry. But he couldn't finish. The weight of it all was too much, the enormity of what we had done crashing down around us. My husband's face turned cold, a mix of anger and heartbreak flickering in his eyes. "You too," he said, his voice trembling. "This is a joke, right? Tell me this is some kind of sick joke." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. The look on his face, the raw betrayal, was like a knife to my chest. Adam tried to step closer, but my husband raised a hand, stopping him. "Don't," he said sharply, his voice rising. "Don't come near me. Either of you." The room felt like it was collapsing in on itself, the weight of the confession leaving us all shattered and lost. No words could fix it. No excuses could erase the pain. We were caught in the aftermath of our choices, and there was no going back. The days that followed were a blur of tension and anguish, each moment a stark reminder of the unraveling life we once knew. My husband barely spoke to me, his eyes hollow and distant, the warmth I had always taken for granted replaced by a coldness that felt impenetrable. Adam moved out soon after, leaving a brief, handwritten note of apology that did little to soothe the devastation he'd left behind. For weeks, the house was heavy with silence, punctuated only by the occasional strained conversation. My husband and I danced around the subject, each too afraid to confront the mess head-on, yet unable to move past it. Every glance, every interaction carried the weight of unspoken pain and questions that neither of us could answer. Eventually, one evening, he broke the silence. "Why?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with heartbreak. "What were you looking for that I couldn't give you?" The question pierced me to my core. I had spent countless nights asking myself the same thing, searching for reasons, for justification, for anything that could make sense of what I had done. But there was no clear answer, only a tangled web of emotions, loneliness, curiosity, and a fleeting desire for something I hadn't even realized I was missing. "I don't know," I admitted, tears spilling down my cheeks. "I wish I could give you an answer that made sense, but I can't. All I know is that I hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for it." He looked at me for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, he said, "I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were, but I also don't know if I'm ready to let go of everything we built." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a glimmer of hope, a fragile thread to hold onto as we navigated the wreckage of our relationship. We agreed to try counseling to see if the pieces could be salvaged, if trust could be rebuilt. It was a slow, painful process filled with setbacks and doubts, but there were moments of clarity, of understanding, that gave us both reason to keep trying. Adam, on the other hand, became a ghost of the past, a reminder of a moment that had changed everything. I heard through mutual friends that he had moved to another city, trying to start fresh. I never reached out, and neither did he. Some wounds were best left undisturbed. In the end, the affair became a scar on the fabric of our marriage, a reminder of the fragility of love and trust, but also of the strength it took to rebuild. We weren't the same people we had been before, and our relationship wasn't the same either. But in the quiet moments as we worked through the pain, I realized that sometimes the hardest thing isn't letting go of the past. It's finding the courage to fight for a future worth holding on to. If this story left you surprised and captivated, take a moment to show your support. Like this video, share it with friends who love gripping tales, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that delve into the unexpected twists, raw emotions, and intricate layers of human connections. Your engagement helps us bring more unforgettable stories to life.